Hello guys, myself Diksha Taneja, Teaching Associate at Faculty of Juridical Sciences, Rama University, Kanpur. So today I am going to deal with the topic emergency. There are basically three types of emergency in our Indian Constitution: national emergency, state emergency and financial emergency. The first which I am going to deal is with national emergency. So Article 352, 353, 358 and 359, four articles deal with the topic of national emergency. Who does proclaim national emergency? The President of India proclaims national emergency. On what grounds does he proclaims it? So there are three grounds for that: war, external aggression and armed rebellion. This word armed rebellion was not there initially. It has been inserted by the 44th Amendment Act. So let us move ahead. There are three times we have already applied national emergency. The first time that was amended on was China attack on India. The first time emergency was applied when China attacked on India, and the reason given was external aggression. It was applied in October 1968 till January 1968. Although the war ended was on 21st October 1965, but still, even after the war ended, government still applied emergency because they were using out of it. All those corrupt practices were being in the name of emergency because our fundamental rights were curtailed during the provisions of emergency. So again a war started between India and Pakistan. There was a conflict between India and Pakistan. Therefore, after some ceasefire and everything, Tashkent Agreement took place. And the situations were again normal. But still, emergency did not revoke. Now what happened was there were a lot of appeals, a lot of movements, even international focus was there, due to which finally emergency was revoked in January 1968. Now the second time when emergency came into picture. Second time emergency came into picture when Pakistan attacked India. That was 3rd December 1971, and now what was used was armed rebellion. Now again, many arrests were happening, a lot of practices were there. MISA, Coffee Posa Acts, all the preventive detention acts were used, and all the opponent leaders were arrested, many things which were happening. Now what happened was a lot of misuse were there. The misuse were arrest, custodial deaths, encounters, everything was happening in this period. Even this emergency was not revoked, and during the continuation of the second emergency, third emergency came into picture. The third emergency took place on July 1975. That was because of Indira Gandhi ji. Our Prime Minister Indira Gandhi immediately asked the President to proclaim emergency on the ground of internal disturbances. Basically, Indira Gandhi was asked to put on her papers, her resignation papers, and what she did was she immediately ordered the President to proclaim emergency. This was the first time President proclaimed emergency just on the advice of the Prime Minister. Council of Ministers were not concerned over here. So now what happened was the third emergency came into the picture. Now internal disturbances were there, opponents were attacked, and President's satisfaction was taken as final as well as conclusive. Now even the press censorship was into picture. Now what happened was the press was not even allowed to post anything which was against the government. So many arrests were happening in this period. So again, after a lot of revolt and a lot of malpractices, it was revoked on 23rd March 1977. So these are the three times we had national emergency into picture. Now let us come upon the approval part. Who does approves emergency? The cabinet plus the Prime Minister. They, with a written advice, send it to the President, and when the President is satisfied that the emergency can be proclaimed, he proclaims emergency. Now, the maximum time emergency can go on is for 1 month, unless it has been approved by the Parliament. Parliament, both the houses, Rajya Sabha as well as the Lok Sabha, with a special majority. Earlier, before 44th Amendment Act, it was just simple majority, but after 44th Amendment Act, what happened was special majority. Now let us come about Article 353. What is Article 353? Article 353 says that during the emergency, all the powers has been conferred upon the center, not the state. Now the state will work according to the directions and the control of the center. Fine. Now we come upon Article 358. What does Article 358 state? It says Article 19. All the 6 freedoms given under Article 19 can be curtailed, but only it can be curtailed if the emergency has been proclaimed on these two grounds, which are the war and the external aggression. If we have proclaimed emergency on these two grounds, war and external aggression, then President can suspend Article 19, all the 6 grounds of it. Now let us come upon Article 359. Is Article 359, it says the President can suspend all the fundamental rights during the emergency except only 2 articles. Those are Article 21 and Article 22. Now, how can an emergency be revoked? There are 2 conditions where the emergency can be revoked. First is due to which conditions the emergency has initially been proclaimed. Now those conditions have been vanished. So first revocation condition is that the condition is vanished, or the other condition which we talk about is Lok Sabha disapproves. Now that means that if the Lok Sabha disapproves about the emergency, then immediately emergency will be revoked back. So moving forward on the topic of emergency, we come forward to the next topic, that is state emergency. State emergency is also known as the President rule. Also, before coming to the state emergency part, I would like to tell that emergency provisions were taken from the Germany Constitution. Now coming to the next topic, that is state emergency, which is also known as our President rules. Now, what is state emergency? The grounds of state emergency are external aggression, internal disturbances, as well as not respecting the constitutional provisions. If any state is not respecting the constitutional provisions, that is the backbone of our state, the Constitution of India, so the state emergency can be applied there. How does this emergency be proclaimed? So the President proclaims this emergency on the report of the governor. If the governor submits a report to the President and states that his state is not working according to the provisions of the Constitution, or if the President is satisfied that the current state is not working around the constitutional provisions, or the third is if the state is not following those constitutional provisions. If above 3, in any of these 3, if the state is falling under, then we will say that the President can proclaim emergency. Now, what is the impact of state emergency? As we have seen in national emergency, our fundamental rights were curtailed, whereas there would be no impact on fundamental rights during the state emergency. Now, what happens for the approval system? The maximum duration for which the state emergency can come is 2 months, that is without approval. But what happens if we get approval of it? If we get approval from the parliaments, both houses, by simple majority this time. In the case of national emergency, we studied was special majority, whereas in the case of state emergency, we will study it's just simple majority of both the houses. And if we get the simple majority and if that resolution is passed, then that emergency can be invoked for 6 months. The same is the procedure for national emergency. The emergency can be proclaimed for 6 months. Now, the maximum limit for our state emergency is 3 years, whereas for national emergency, there is no limit. Okay, after every 6 months, it can be redone. Whereas for state emergency, you can proclaim state emergency for maximum 3 years and the approval will be given for 6 months. Also, this emergency, the state emergency, can be revoked at any time without giving explanations. Okay, so now let's come to one important case, that is SR Bomai case, which challenged Article 356, which covers state emergency, and said that Indian federation system cannot be compared, and also stated that Parliament's satisfaction was subject to judicial review. If you guys remember, I just stated that national emergency stated that President's satisfaction is final as well as conclusive, whereas the SR Bomai case stated that President's satisfaction is subject to judicial review. Now, this was all for my state emergency. Now, let's come to the final topic of my today's lecture, that is Article 360, financial emergency. Financial emergency has not been proclaimed in India yet. There was a very close situation in the year 1992, but we saved our country from the financial emergency crisis. What is financial emergency? I guess the word itself states itself. So, what is financial emergency? A financial emergency is when India or any part of our country is facing from financial crisis. then the president has the power to proclaim financial emergency in our country. Though we are lucky enough that financial emergency has not been proclaimed till date in our country. What is financial emergency? It is a financial crisis in any part of our country or state. It can work for 2 months unless it is approved. What is the consequences? What happens in a financial emergency? The first, we reduce the salary of the people of the state legislators, whereas even reduce of the salary and allowances of state executives, even the salaries and salaries of center executives like the judges, the Supreme Court judges, the High Court judges, even their salaries are reduced during the time of the financial emergencies. Also, money bills or financial bills are reserved for the president's assent. Both the bills are reserved for the time being till the president's assent is there. Also, one more thing, that during the time of state emergency, our state executive and state legislature is suspended. During the time of state emergency, the second type of emergency, state executive and legislature is suspended or dissolved, and the responsibility is given to the president, who can further delegate that power to the governor. That is his choice. So, concluding my today's lecture is, what I have dealt with is emergency, that has been dealt under the part 18 of the Constitution. There are 3 types of emergency: national, state, financial. National emergency is an emergency where the president feels that the nation is in a wrong situation, where war situation, external aggression situation, armed rebellion situation, and then the president satisfies and then he proclaims national emergency. State emergencies, these are the grounds, and financial emergency has not yet been proclaimed in our country. Thank you.